to return to China and inherit his family's billion-dollar fortune. The rich young Master Kyun broke up with his foreign girlfriend. But he never expected that his usually gentle and quiet girlfriend would suddenly pull a gun from her bag, saying if he dared to break up with her, she'd send him off right there. Before she finished her sentence, a bullet flew out of the barrel. The young master, shocked and terrified, let out a scream and ran for his life in his pajamas. His girlfriend chased after him and fired again, scaring him out of his wits. He ran all the way to the hotel lobby, thinking he had finally escaped. But then he slammed right into the revolving door and fainted. When he opened his eyes, a black gun muzzle was pointed at his forehead. At that critical moment, a group of men in black suits rushed in and took the girl away. The young master finally boarded a flight back home. The first thing he did after returning to China was to ask his butler for a flashy sports car. After taking a few spins, he drove off to visit his mother, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, at the church. His mother, a priestess, was giving a sermon when she saw her son walk in dressed like a flamboyant rebel. She almost fainted on the spot, but he greeted her with a cheeky smile and casually found a seat. A girl beside him curiously stared. She'd never seen someone with hair that color, but in the next second, the eccentric guy actually winked at her, leaving the girl completely flustered. At that moment, the young master had no idea that this one glance would mark the start of their fate together. The girl's name was Xiaoya. To fulfill her dream of studying abroad, she worked 10 jobs a day and tried every way to save on food and expenses. She even came to the church for the free lunch. Before leaving, she saw some eggs at the entrance and wanted to take a few for dinner. But when she saw the sign that said, "Only one per person," she reluctantly put them back. While resting on a bench, she suddenly heard people arguing in the next room. She turned her head and accidentally made eye contact with the young master, who was getting scolded. He grinned at her, making her quickly shrink back in fear. As she was leaving and saw no one around, she couldn't resist grabbing some eggs again. Just then, the young master walked out and caught her in the act. Embarrassed, she tried to explain, but he complained she took too few and told her to open her clothes so he could give her more eggs. Xiaoya was left speechless. Before leaving, she turned and gave him a piece of her mind, earning a big eye roll from him. Thinking they'd never meet again, she didn't realize fate had other plans. That day, Xiaoya was temporarily called in to cover as a waitress at the hotel kitchen. At first, she was reluctant, but when she heard waitresses could earn tips, her eyes lit up. She entered the private room with a fruit platter, only to find the guests were the young master and a group of spoiled rich kids. Xiaoya saw some bills on the ground and, judging by the way the men were looking at her, assumed it was a tip. Just as she happily bent down to pick it up, a man stopped her and started mocking her. She soon realized these guys were humiliating her for fun, but for the sake of a tip, she kept her head down. The young master recognized her but didn't stop his friends. He just silently watched. After they had their fun, they let her leave. But just as she was leaving, the door opened, and she stumbled, falling right into the young master's arms. Embarrassed, she ran off. Little did they know, their fates were now entwined. Another day, Xiaoya, busy with work, used her break to sell corn on the street. Not far away, the young master was enjoying his tea. Seeing how hard Xiaoya was working, he couldn't help but sigh. Not long after, she rushed up to him, asking him to watch the corn while she went to the bathroom, and dashed off without waiting for his response. Though he complained, he still helped her. But then the cafe owner came over, annoyed that the corn was affecting his business, and dumped it all on the ground. The young master didn't care, but when Xiaoya returned and saw the mess, she panicked and asked what happened. He didn't bother to explain, just handed her some money. She quickly began picking up the corn, and he found her unexpectedly amusing. The next day, after working a night shift at a club, Xiaoya had only slept for 2 hours before showing up for another job. Her friend Juanhao worried she was pushing herself too hard, but she didn't care. She was desperate to earn enough money to study abroad. Unbeknownst to her, the party she was working at was hosted by the young master and his brother. The young master spotted her in the crowd and waved for her to come over. But due to exhaustion, Xiaoya started feeling dizzy and wobbly over to him, accidentally placing her hand on his leg. Realizing something was off, he immediately pushed her away. Just then, he spotted someone familiar. His foreign ex-girlfriend had found him. He panicked and tried to flee, but Xiaoya grabbed his arm. Seeing his ex getting closer, the guy panicked even more, so he pulled Xiaoya into a sudden kiss. Xiaoya finally managed to push him away. He dragged her around again, recklessly swinging, but his attacks were easily dodged by Xiaoya. Xiaoya insisted that she had to be compensated for her losses. 50,000 yuan would do. 50,000? Yes, 50,000 yuan would be enough. As the two were bickering, the ex-girlfriend showed. The ex had even followed him all the way back to China. Two bodyguards grabbed the man, about to drag him away. To completely get rid of his ex, the man pointed to Xiaoya and said she was his new girlfriend. But the ex didn't believe it. Shenya firmly declared that the two of them were truly in love. Still unwilling to give up, the ex proposed they compete fairly by holding a drinking contest. Whoever lost would back off voluntarily. Kyun immediately said if Xiaoya won, he'd give her 2 million as a reward. The moment Xiaoya heard there was money involved, her eyes lit up. She didn't even care that Kyun was using her as a pawn. She agreed on the spot. They say money can make the devil work. Xiaoya drank like it was water, one glass after another. Soon, the ex couldn't take it anymore and admitted defeat. Xiaoya, holding on to her last shred of sobriety, rushed to demand the promised 2 million from Kyun. The two of them headed straight for the counter. Xiaoya, who hadn't gotten the money yet, tried hard not to collapse. Just as Kyun withdrew the money and turned around, he found Xiaoya had already passed out on the floor. He hadn't even gotten her home address, so he had no choice but to carry her back to his hotel. Then he used her phone to call Juanhao. When Juanhao arrived, he found Xiaoya completely wasted. Did she drink? He asked. Was the guy with her Japanese? Juanhao avoided answering and just picked up Xiaoya, ready to leave. But Kyun stopped him and pulled out a wad of cash, saying it was Xiaoya's payment for work. Those words gave Juanhao the wrong idea. Not knowing the full story, he refused to take the money. And once Xiaoya woke up, he immediately asked her what kind of relationship she had with Kyun. But all Xiaoya could think about was the 2 million. When she realized she hadn't actually gotten the money yet, it felt like 1,000 ants were crawling through her chest. Completely unbearable. But what she didn't know was that the real pain was still to come. That day, she finally scraped together enough money for her study abroad dream. She solemnly handed 50 million in tuition fees to her friend who worked at the International Student Agency. The friend swore she'd take care of all the arrangements. Finally about to realize her dream, Xiaoya was thrilled. But to her shock, days passed and there was no word from her friend. She called but found the number had been disconnected. Sensing something was wrong, she rushed to the agency, only to be told her friend had resigned. The apartment her friend had rented was also empty. That's when Xiaoya realized she'd been scammed by her friend. Meanwhile, that untrustworthy friend had boarded a plane for an overseas vacation with her boyfriend, using Xiaoya's hard-earned savings. And because Xiaoya had paid everything in cash, the police had a hard time recovering the funds. At that moment, Xiaoya felt like life had no meaning. She boarded a bus in a daze, only to see insufficient balance flash on the card reader. That was the last straw. To make money, she had been working 10 jobs a day. To save time, she only slept 2 hours a night. She was so exhausted she could barely walk straight but still forced herself to keep going. To cut living expenses, she even relied on free meals from the church. All of this, just to save up enough to study abroad and pursue her dream of becoming a chef. But after all that suffering, after finally scraping together the money, she was left penniless, betrayed by the very friend she trusted most. She didn't even have enough left for a bus ride. She stood on a bridge, crying out in frustration at the unfairness of life. Just as she thought of ending it all, something terrifying surfaced in the water. A huge alligator-like creature. She screamed and half of her body slipped off the railing. Thankfully, the police arrived in time to pull her back. They notified her best friend Juinhao to come pick her up. Under Juinhao's pressing questions, Xiaoya finally told him the whole story of being defrauded by her friend. Worried she might still be unstable, Juinhao gave her Kyun contact info. After all, Kyun owed her that 2 million. It might help her get through this rough patch. As soon as she saw the message, Xiaoya rushed to contact Kyun. But Kyun's situation wasn't great either. Just moments ago, Kyun's grandfather had finalized the inheritance. Her first and second aunts each got over 100 billion in assets. But Kyun's father didn't receive a single cent because he had never contributed anything to the family. When he heard the news, her father was stunned. Kyun was even more shaken. She'd always lived lavishly off the family fortune. She had returned to China to get some cash and head back overseas to enjoy life. Now that her father hadn't inherited anything, her plans were basically ruined. Just as she was in the middle of despair, her mother, a priest, called her. Turns out, her grandfather had left her something separately, a treasure warehouse, a special building he'd gifted to her. As she was on her way to this so-called treasure warehouse, she saw Xiaoya calling, and to her own surprise, she felt genuinely happy. Oh, occasionally. So when will you see Xiaoya? Well, that's Xiaoya. Who hasn't seen him? He said she'd meet Xiaoya, so he gave Xiaoya the address. Soon after, he arrived at the building her grandfather had left her. When he opened the door, he was stunned. The entire place was covered in thick dust. Books and junk were scattered everywhere. He searched high and low but couldn't find a single valuable item. On top of that, the building had several billion in debt. He couldn't even sell it. Just as he was about to break down in frustration, Xiaoya arrived. There you are. Seeing Kyun unresponsive, Xiaoya walked up to him. But she didn't notice the box on the floor, tripped over it, and fell straight into Kyun's arms. No one knew what would happen next. The girl suddenly looked up and shoved the young master away, accidentally knocking him into an ink spill. Even worse, his limited edition watch got scratched in the process. Kyun sternly demanded compensation for the damage. He asked for 200% in return. It was incredibly over the top. When Xiaoya heard the price of the watch, she was instantly stunned. After a long round of bargaining, Kyun finally agreed to deduct the earlier 2 million and settle the matter for an additional 5 million. Xiaoya never imagined that she came to collect money, but ended up apologizing and landing herself in a mountain of debt. But Kyun's carefree days were also coming to an end. After losing his financial support, he had no choice but to move out of his luxury hotel. He maxed out over a dozen credit cards just to pay off the hotel bill. Thinking he could ask her family for money, he reached out. But his father didn't receive any inheritance, and his mother didn't want anything more to do with him, telling him to figure out his own way to make money. Desperate, Henry went to look for his brother, and just happened to run into Juinhao after work. That's when he found out Xiaoya was working as his assistant. On their way out, he overheard Xiaoya and Juinhao were going to a barbecue restaurant. Kyun immediately dragged his brother to follow them, shamelessly insisting on joining them for dinner. Although Juinhao didn't like this entitled and spoiled guy, he couldn't outright refuse since he was present during the previous incident. But just like the first time they met, Kyun immediately tried to label Xiaoya as her sister again. Shenyu's jealousy flared up seeing Juinhao serving food to Xiaoya. He immediately started causing trouble. Now Xiaoya didn't know whether to eat or not. It was awkward either way. When Xiaoya went to the bathroom, Kyun intercepted her at the door and threatened to tell her boyfriend everything. But Xiaoya brushed it off, saying it wasn't even her real boyfriend. She only said that last time because Juinhao was there and she didn't want things to get awkward. Hearing this, Kyun was instantly in a great mood. The next day, Kyun, having been kicked out by his brother, had no choice but to go to a storage house. His priority was to find a place to sleep. After thinking for a while, he pulled out her phone and called Xiaoya. The moment the call connected, he told her to hurry up and pay the money back. But suddenly, Kyun changed his tone. Xiaoya was confused by what he said and started recalling all the things that had happened between them. Then the scene shifted. Xiaoya, now all dressed up, came over as requested. He had even taken the time to change her outfit. Seeing Xiaoya arrive as promised, Kyun couldn't help but smile a little at the corners of his mouth. Who knows what the young master was thinking? He dragged Xiaoya straight to the supermarket and started a shopping spree without saying a word. Xiaoya asked curiously what all this was for. Hearing her question, Xiaoya suddenly looked a bit shy, thinking, just as I thought, Shenyu probably likes me. Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, the reality that followed totally caught her off guard. After shopping, the two of them went to the warehouse. Kyun handed her gloves and an apron, and then told her to start cleaning the place up. That's when Xiaoya finally realized. This wasn't a date. It was free labor. What a waste of her outfit. She was about to refuse when Kyun said she would deduct 200,000 from her debt in exchange. Thinking about the 5 million she still owed, Xiaoya had no choice but to grit her teeth and agree. Halfway through cleaning, Kyun's childhood friend showed up and even mistook Xiaoya for a cleaning lady. Kyun didn't bother to explain. When he came back from outside, the once messy room was now bright and tidy. Seeing Xiaoya resting on a chair, Kyun couldn't help but want to tease her. He walked up and stepped on the rocking chair, bringing the two of them very close. Xiaoya instantly panicked and got up quickly. Kyun complimented her on her efficiency and asked her to go upstairs and clean the bedroom too. That was the last straw for Xiaoya. She said she'd been working all day and hadn't even had a sip of water. Seeing Xiaoya's pitiful face, Kyun pushed her back down into the chair. That intimate gesture made Xiaoya's face flush with embarrassment. Soon after, Kyun went upstairs. As a trained bartender, he quickly whipped up a cocktail for Xiaoya. Coming back downstairs, he saw Xiaoya lying on the chair with her eyes closed and couldn't resist teasing her again. Xiaoya took a sip of the drink, and a refreshing taste spread in her mouth. Normally she didn't like alcohol, but this time she didn't mind the flavor at all. She realized then that this aloof young master wasn't as detached from the world as he seemed. But in the next second, Kyun's comment made her instantly feel awkward again. Xiaoya said, "I don't even care anymore. I've never had anything go right since I met you." Then came Xiaoya's first time attending a party in the city. As soon as she arrived, she was fascinated by all the dazzling glasses of wine. She stared at them, mesmerized, not realizing danger was approaching. Someone had tangled the power cable from the lights around her feet. As she moved, the lights began to wobble dangerously. Kyun, who had been watching her the whole time, immediately noticed and waved at her in warning. But Xiaoya didn't understand and turned around, only to be stunned by the screen behind her. Kyun rushed toward Xiaoya and, at the critical moment, pushed her out of harm's way, shielding her with her body. They narrowly escaped injury, but Xiaoya fainted when she saw the blood on Kyun's head. They were quickly sent to the hospital. Although Xiaoya was unharmed, she had been working intense part-time jobs to pay off her debt and was completely exhausted. The moment she hit the bed, she fell fast asleep. After learning the reason from the nurse, Kyun didn't have the heart to wake her up and stayed by her side to keep watch. When Xiaoya finally woke up, she immediately complained that nothing good ever happened whenever she ran into Kyun. That's when Xiaoya noticed that Kyun's arm was now in a cast. She instantly felt embarrassed and apologized sincerely, not noticing the slight smile tugging at the corners of Kyun's mouth. The next morning, Kyun couldn't stop thinking about the moment he heroically saved Xiaoya. The memory left him so flustered, he couldn't get back to sleep. "Are you back? I already ate. Look." Then he brought her startup proposal to his brother. Turns out he planned to open a bar. But he didn't have the money, so he wanted to rope her brother into investing. Seeing how well he had handled himself at the company's cocktail party, his brother agreed to invest 50 million yuan. The moment he got the money, he called Xiaoya. Then the two of them went out to the market to buy supplies. Since Kyun's arm was still in a cast, Xiaoya naturally became his designated pack mule. The 50 million was burned through in no time. Shenyu even had to secretly sell her dad's beloved car to finish renovating the bar. That day, Xiaoya was painting the bar's sign under Kyun's supervision. But Kyun kept nitpicking his word choices, even mocking her handwriting and saying she must have been a terrible student. Fed up, Xiaoya shoved the brush at him and told him to write it herself. But Kyun had been messing with her on purpose. Once he had the brush, he launched into an over-the-top performance. Xiaoya stared at this chaotic, completely speechless. Noticing her expression, Kyun flashed a victorious grin. Moments later, he told Xiaoya she had something on her face, and while pretending to help, he painted her face until she looked like a cat. Just then, Juinhao called Xiaoya. Hearing her call his name so cheerfully and seeing her run outside to take the call, Kyun's face immediately darkened. He snuck over to the door to eavesdrop, only to be caught red-handed by Xiaoya. After the call, Xiaoya timidly asked him, "What are you doing eavesdropping?" But Kyun started playing dumb. I. Just then Kyun says, "I love you, Xiaoya." Leaving her shocked, Xiaoya shyly muttered, "You." Just then Kyun goes to her looking at her eye to eye as the both confess love.